Morning, welcome everybody. This is just a short message to say that participants have been informed that this meeting will be recorded, and those that didn't want to share their image or identity have turned off their camera and switched their name into a general participant tag. This message will also be placed in the meeting chat. And so we are sure that since in situ values privacy very much, that this is guaranteed for everybody. And with no further ado, I will leave now the floor to our host, Erna, and I wish you all a good session. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Paula. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this first webinar in the In-Situ webinar series, where we'll be focusing on what contributes to the viability of creative small-scale enterprises in non-urban areas. My name is Erna Kaaber, and I'm a part of the In-Situ research team from Iceland, or the Icelandic In-Situ Lab, and Bifrost University, and I will be your host for today. We're going to begin with a little introduction from Nancy Duxbury, who is the lead researcher in the In-Situ project. Nancy?
Hello, thank you, Erna, and thank you for everyone being here so early for some of you, and for participating in this first webinar of the In-Situ project. As many of you probably know, the In-Situ project, the longer name is the place-based innovation of cultural and creative industries in non-urban areas. And our focus over 4 years will be to look at the needs, the opportunities, and the appropriate structures for support of cultural and creative industry and cultural and creative work in non-urban areas. So this is the series of webinars that we've planned relate to different themes within that broader umbrella. This first one is focusing really on the vitality of individual organizations. We'll go on to look at innovation ecosystems, as well as the impact of cultural and creative work in local areas. But just to give a really brief context, the webinar series was envisioned as a space for bringing together practitioners and researchers and others who have worked in topics and address topics that are very similar to what In-Situ is looking at, so that we don't reinvent the wheel and that we can benefit from the work that's been done before and the insights that can be brought together, so that we can be stronger together to go forward for the vitality of cultural work in non-urban areas. That's enough from me. Thank you very much. Back to Erna.
Thank you, Nancy. So I'm going to go briefly over our agenda today. Our first step is to meet today's cultural and creative sectors experts and hear their insights from previous and concurrent research projects and other initiatives. We will then have a general discussion on today's topic, and you can all participate by writing comments and questions in the chat window. We will also be submitting a poll, and you can find a link for that in the chat, and we will be keeping it open for the next 40 minutes or so. And I urge you to give your answers as soon as possible, so we can incorporate your answers in the debate. My colleagues will introduce the poll's main findings later on, as well as questions arising during our talks, and you can of course share them with us in the chat window. We will then hear reflections from Susan Luckman from the University of South Australia, who is on the In-Situ International Advisory Board, and then continue our discussions with final comments and responses. And Nancy will finally conclude our today's program. I would like to set the tone of today's talk in an Icelandic theme. Iceland is situated at the edge of the European community in a broad context, and we are relatively informal in the north and address one another on a first name basis. We never address one another with surnames, and I feel the practice increases communication affinity. So, having culturally veiled my fear of mispronouncing our presenters' last names, I would like to welcome our experts, Ralph from Take Art in the UK, Musa from Stand Foundation in South Africa, Martha from Pantheon University in Greece, Ella from Lapland University in Finland, Martin from Extremadura University in Spain, and Lydia from the National Academy of Theatre and Film Arts in Bulgaria. Welcome all. And with such familiarization, I kind of immediately feel that I have known you all for a much longer time than I have. And I hope this will work as well for everybody else attending our webinar. With any further ado, I would like to ask Ralph Lister to the podium, and he's going to introduce to us the SPARS Plus project, the Creative Europe project on supporting and promoting arts in rural settlements in Europe. Ralph, welcome.
Thank you, Erna. That was a lovely introduction, and hello to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning. So I'm just going to make a short introduction to put some context before I speak about the subject. So Take Art, to begin with, Take Art is an arts organisation. So Nancy referenced the creative industries, and the arts sit in one small section of creative industries. And our interest, I think, is more social than it is economic. Take Art, my own organisation, is based in a rural area of southwest England, and we are a doing organisation, a grassroots organisation, and we have an office which is located in a barn on a farm down a track in the middle of a rural area. So SPARS, supporting and promoting arts in rural settlements of Europe. There have been two SPARS projects. The first one, Take Art, was the lead partner. Unfortunately, due to Brexit, we could no longer continue. However, we made a good project, and we had 5 partners from 5 different countries, from the UK, Estonia, Italy, Lithuania, and Romania. We also had associates in Sweden and Norway. And I'm delighted to say that the project was very successful, and we secured funding for a new 4-year project, which will run from February this year to 2027, and the group has grown, and I will talk a little bit about partnership and collaboration later. So we now have 11 partners from 9 countries, including the Czech Republic, Estonia, Germany. We have 2 partners from Hungary, 2 partners from Italy, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Sweden, and we also have an associate in Norway as well. Let me just, yes, this is an image. I just wanted to sort of give a visual representation of what we talk about when we say rural touring. On the right-hand side, you can see images of 2 very typical buildings located in England. So they are community spaces owned by the community. And so this is, as I say, kind of a grassroots extension of what we do. And on the left-hand side, you can see a picture of a performance. This is a dance performance. And you can see how close the audiences are to the performers. So this particular company, they had a large-scale production, which they scaled down in order to bring it into a real community. And one of the things that we never wish to compromise on is quality. Here's an image of some what we call local promoters. These are local volunteers, and without them, rural touring simply couldn't happen. They are the people that know their audience. They're the people that choose the shows, and they're the people that do the hardest job, which is to sell the tickets for the shows. And we work very closely with the promoters to support them and to enable them to do such a brilliant job. Some brief statistics. So SPARS 2 is a 4-year project, 11 partners from 9 countries. There'll be 150 performances over the 3 years. We'll produce some resources, toolkits, both for artists and promoters. We'll be holding a rural symposium in the Czech Republic in 2025. Watch this space. We have a new website, spars.eu. We're going to carry out research into arts funding in rural areas. We're going to research reasons why artists find it challenging to tour rurally. We'll also have an advocacy program. There'll be an evaluation of the project. We will incorporate into a new organisation during this next 4-year period. We're going to be developing a digital platform presence, and we'll produce a film documenting the project. So contact details, there we go. Website, Take Art, that's the website for my own organisation, and that's my email address, and there's a Facebook page. So I've stopped sharing my screen. So oh, I think I have. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about sort of the viability, the key aspects of viability that I feel are integral to the work that we do. And I think that observing our sparse partners, I feel that we are quite similar. I will say that the sparse partners are very, very different. Some are very large organizations with a lot of employees. Some are actually really, really quite small. I think one of the smallest organizations has 2 people who are operating it. So we do vary enormously in terms of scale and size. So resilience, a willingness to keep going if the first attempt to find funds is rejected. It took several years to find the partners for Sparse. It was quite painstaking, I should say. I traveled to meet prospective partners at festivals. One partner suggested another partner, and our first application was unsuccessful. We failed, but we carried on, and we were successful. And in the first project, one of our original partners dropped out, and we were able to find another partner from another European project that we were involved with. Adventurousness is, for us, adventurousness and curiosity. I think for me, it's really important to be interested in meeting new people. And that brings with it a challenge, which is to be open-minded. It's one thing to want to meet new people, but sometimes those new partners have different ways of doing things. And I think it's really important to be confident, to be challenged in one's own way of thinking. Risk-taking. I would say that the Sparse project is breaking new ground. A project like this has never happened before. We're doing things that we don't know how to do, but we think that we have the skill set to undertake those tasks. And there are always people, experts out there that we can ask if we don't know the answers. Entrepreneurialism. It's not necessarily common for an organization like Take Art. We're very dependent on project funding. So we're always having to think about new ideas and new projects. And one of the really important aspects of that is you can't make the projects happen without the resources. So entrepreneurialism is both about having the ideas, but also securing the funding. Identifying a USP, something that's unique to a unique selling point to your project. So the first Sparse project was notable because of its rural focus. And we were invited to make presentations at a number of different events, one of which was the launch of the Perform Europe programme in 2021. Shared creative thinking and equality of commitment. I think problem solving, again, partly because we're project fund orientated, we always work in partnership. And for me, it's a pleasure not to be challenged, well, to be challenged, yes, of course, but also to hear different ways, different solutions, different ideas. I find that incredibly stimulating. Fundraising, finding the money is so important. So we know that as given, so I won't talk about that. Vision and good judgment. It's not actually so difficult to have good ideas, but the challenge is to find the money to support those ideas. So that goes back to the entrepreneurialism. Modesty and realism. I thought about this after an interview the other day, which is don't overstate what the arts can achieve. We hear a lot about the economic side, but also the social side. The arts are not a magic bullet. They don't solve all of society's problems. And in fact, there need to be sort of key other factors in place in order for the arts to flourish. I've worked on housing estates where we were told to go in and solve all the not told to solve the problems, but that was the idea. And it's just not, in some ways, it's just totally unrealistic. Long-term thinking. I think it's more productive and more efficient to develop longer-term projects than short-term initiatives. So a lot of the projects that we try to develop are around 3 years 2 to 3 years longer if possible. And that gives you a degree of stability, gives the people that you're working with or people who are working for you the stability of contract if you have a longer term approach. And the last one, which I will talk a little bit about in detail, is partnership and collaboration. I think it's those things to me are absolutely essential. And one of the things to be aware of is about, conflict and resistance. If you have a group, there will be challenges, and I think having the goodwill of the people around the table is really essential. You, as a colleague once said to me, choose your partners carefully. So in terms of collaboration, grassroots community engagement. So our project couldn't happen without those local promoters. And those local promoters might be a teacher, it might be the local mayor, or it might simply be an individual who is just well-liked and well-connected in their own local community. And they are experts. They're experts at what they do. So for us, the relationship with them is absolutely fundamental. Networking. There's no question that a lot of us feel isolated. So, we work in an individual situation, isolated in a geographic sense in some ways. So networking is a great way of offering a morale booster to each other. And I find with the sparse group that in some ways we have a stronger relationship with each other across Europe than I have with some of the organizations in my immediate area. So that confluence of thinking is a really important part of that kind of bonding process. Research. I think one of the challenges I've identified is making the invisible visible. There are very few statistics that can back up or to evidence the need that is out there. And so for us, carrying out research is very closely linked to advocacy. That unless you've got the data, the evidence, which can feel like a little bit dry, but it's really important, then this can be a really important tool for advocacy, which I found to my benefit, certainly in the UK. In terms of advocacy, many voices joined together are much more effective than one voice on its own. It stands to reason. We all know this. I've been part of 4 networking advocacy groups in the UK and in Europe. So I'm part of a national group in the UK called the National Rural Touring Forum. There are something like 30 odd organisations, and they have a very strong relationship with the main arts funder in the country. A new group called Raisin, the Rural Arts Sustainability Group. This is mainly UK companies that are not just about touring, but about working with communities or developing work projects in community settings. Sparse, I've mentioned. And finally, Area, Arts in Rural European Areas. This is a relatively new organisation, and I can give people more details, contact details about that if they're interested. One of the main obstacles, I'm coming to the end now, Erna, so I'm almost finished. A key obstacle working in the rural culture sector is the weakness of the infrastructure, and that is systemic. So public investment is needed to complement the amazing work that individual artists and arts organisations are doing. And we need to join together to make a case for equitable resource allocation to support an improved rural cultural infrastructure. And that's one of the aims for Sparse and the advocacy work that I'm involved with. It's very evident that the majority of cultural investment goes into urban and metropolitan areas. Finally, sort of a PS really for me, it's the portfolio mentality. And this applies to individual practitioners and organisations that are not reliant on one source of income. And that's to look for plural funding. And that suggests that partnership and collaborations with sectors outside the arts, education, health, the environment, community development are all really important. So in my own organisation, Take Art, we have spoken word projects with adults with mental health issues. We run dance sessions with older people with dementia. And we work with children and young people through music who are excluded from mainstream education. And we are in the process of developing a really interesting collaboration with local food producers. So where we can work, there's a lot of crossover in terms of value in terms of the ethics of those people that are working at a local level to produce and distribute food, and the kind of work that we're doing. So this is a relatively new development, which we're very, very happy about. Thank you. I hope I haven't spoken too quickly, but for the moment, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you very much. We are going to continue with our presenters, and next up we have Musa from the STAND Foundation, and I would very much like to ask you to help us understand better what the STAND Foundation stands for, and your insights into our today's topic. Musa?
Thank you so much. Thank you for that warm welcome and for having me here. And also thank you to Ralph for such a beautiful presentation. I'm a fan of your work already. So my name is Musa Shadwayo. I am the creative director of Mahaisa Productions. I am a dancer, choreographer, and performing artist that was born and raised and still resides in Mapumulo, which is a rural area that is 15 kilometers west of where King Shaga's grave is. But I do also stay in Durban, where I am able to continue working. But here today, I have been sent by STAND as a board member to come and represent them. STAND is an independent, non-profit and public benefiting entity that was created by individuals across provinces in South Africa with the intention of nurturing, promoting, and celebrating contemporary South African dance and theatre. It was mostly during the first year of our COVID experience that we came together and really materialized this vision. My intention today is to share some of the practices and methodologies that are used by some of our South African organizations and individuals, myself included, with the attempts of contributing towards the sustainability and the viability of their community-based small-scale enterprises in non-urban areas specifically, with a specific focus on South African dance. The first point that I would like to put across is the idea of growing our own timber. I will quote, for instance, the work that is done by the Moving Into Dance, Mofatong, which is currently celebrating their 40th year anniversary. And this is all through a vision and a hard work that was put together by our legendary Sylvia Magogo Glassa, whose work really contributes towards, or contributed towards an interracial society through dance. The trainees and participants that were invited to be a part of the initiative have largely been coming from semi-urban spaces, the townships and the rural areas. And the company has continued growing, equipping them with the necessary skills for them to become performing artists, but also to become trainers that they will then go back to their communities and continue impacting their communities with the necessary skills that they themselves have acquired. The formulation, for instance, of the company then comprised of the alumni, the former trainees, but also then expanded towards forming a company that now creates groundbreaking work that continues to be celebrated across the world. But they also continue creating causes that further equip these dance makers, choreographers, and dance teachers for them to be able to go back to their communities and use these skills for their own business gain purposes. Flatfoot Dance Company in Durban, Kwamashu Community Arts Program, Vuyani Dance Theatre, are some of the few that one can mention that continue adopting and adapting this approach and the method as well as the practice to the benefit of the communities that they continue serving. The Forgotten Angle Theatre Collective, for instance, have implemented a similar approach and extended it further to creating a community-oriented, environmentally friendly festival that invites community members, artists from the outside, and creatives at large to partner with them in staging site-specific works in a socio-politically and environmentally friendly space deep in the rural areas of Mpumalanga. My Body, My Space is the name of that festival. I see a synergy already there, Ralph. I emphasize the partnering approach because unlike most festivals, their approach is really to invite you with whatever resources that you may have. And yes, of course, giving you an honorarium as assisted by some funding agency, but mostly with the intention of creating this network or a pool of community-based artists that are going to network, share, and continue engaging and expanding each other's business skills, creative practices, etc. I will talk more later about how they have successfully added an agriculture department where we are now no longer just seeing the idea of growing your own timber as a metaphor, but literally in practice as they now grow their own food that they basically use as part of this festival. The KwaMashu Community Arts Program also runs their program that continues training artists in the community of KwaMashu, which is a township, that therefore graduate and continue embracing international stages, including the Lion King being one that continues to host most of the people that come from KCAP. We also do see some in the TV industry really creating groundbreaking work as graduates or alumni from KCAP. But all of these people and KCAP, they never really detach from their roots, which is KwaMashu, the township where it all started. They continue hosting, for instance, community-based arts festivals, be it for theater, be it for dance, be it for music. It's all rooted and it's happening in KwaMashu with the involvement of the community being prioritized. The second point that I would like to make is redefining partnerships, i.e. the concept and the approach. A few years ago, I was invited or I was approached by a gumboot making company or a Wellington boot making company for purposes of narrating a story that celebrates how they continue evolving with creating these boots for safety, but also for comfort. And so in South Africa, we've got what we call Gumboot Dance Company, which is a form of dance that really came through during the apartheid era. So they saw the need to partner with a choreographer that would assist in drawing a parallel between their evolution of the boot as well as the evolution of dance. So of course I couldn't say no to such an invitation, but it had to have a twist. Instead of seeing it as a once-off interaction where they were going to pay me for my services, I approached them and rather proposed that we redefine the nature of our partnership. Gumboot dance is one of the dance styles that I do access and celebrate. So why do I need to continue buying boots if and when I now have a corporate company that has seen my work and is interacting with me? We therefore formed a partnership and an agreement that from then on, should they need services of a dance company, I'm the go-to person. And should I need services of, or rather products where I would have to use boots, I literally have to go back to them and say, I need X amount number of boots. The partnership, of course, expands far more than just exchanging boots and or services. It's a long-term interaction. Still under the idea of redefining partnerships, we are now partnering with local schools in ways that are different than we have done before. We understand and acknowledge that schools have the infrastructure, whether it's just literally a school hall or a classroom, it is what we need because space is expensive where I am from. So some of our artists therefore engage with teachers as teachers' assistants because most of our teachers do not necessarily have first-hand experience or training where dance, theater, or art is concerned. They literally just get given the syllabus and they're expected to deliver without the understanding or the know-how. That is where we come in. I bring in the dancers or the artists. You allow me the use of your space and let's forge our way forward together. We also do partner with various organizations that are community-centered, who are in line with the vision that we have. The Dennis Haley Center, for instance, is in partnership with my company, Mahaisa Productions. They largely cater for the homeless people of Durban, And we largely serve the communities where most of the people or artists come from. They have the space, we have the skill, we use the space at no charge, and we offer our services for them to host various activities that are artistically inclined. The next point, collaborating across disciplines. Most traditional dance groups in rural communities partner with crafters who make their traditional wear, their drums, as well as their beadwork. This has come out of the need for them to find creative ways of fundraising or saving and promoting business skills within their communities. So now they no longer have to go to the city to go look for beads and to buy drums and many other items, but they now go to the crafters that are within their communities themselves to outsource this material. They themselves then become, if you like, living billboards. They become the walking, talking, dancing models, if you like. But of course, the idea of them therefore being seen in various spaces also attracts business into the communities where they come from. Those that sell the drums and the beadwork and amabesho, or the traditional wear in the cities, have now found suppliers that they are now outsourcing all this material that they sell in the city through having witnessed the work that is done by these dancers of these theater groups, who then would market or advertise the work that they were as having created by crafters from their own spaces. The last point, realigning social entrepreneurship practices with the services and the products we offer. A lady by the name of Ketiwe Mamela, who is a graduate of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, not only has come up with an idea of putting together a group of ladies that are going to do craft work, but she is aware of how some of those ladies are very knowledgeable where culture and tradition is concerned, and how she is mostly approached by people in the cities to provide the beadwork and the traditional wear. She now offers services as a package where, should you be interested in buying some of her work, she will also advise you on the actual event where you are going to be wearing that, in terms of what to do culturally or traditionally and how not to do it. She is also now a founder of a traditional group that largely celebrates culture and tradition and goes around, therefore, and performing in various spaces. Various spaces, yes. Dance groups now see the need for them to first start business in their own communities by performing in weddings, traditional ceremonies, and various spaces where they themselves can be celebrated by their own communities first. So these are just a few of the examples that I have seen and used myself in approaching this idea of creating sustainability or viability. But as a practicing artist myself, I find pleasure in pulling together all these groups with the intention of forming a network that I can further expose towards the opportunities that I continue creating in the city, or through opportunities that I get even when I am asked to supply artists for TV. Other than that, I do hope I will be sharing more as we continue. As I said, the intention was simply just to highlight these as a few. Thank you.
Thank you, Musa. Thank you very much. That was very illuminating. I would like to iterate that we have the poll going on in the chat, and you can share questions with us in the chat window, and please do. And I would like to remind you that we're on a very tight schedule. So Martha, you are up next, and I invite you to tell us about the Coral ITN training network and reflect on the viability topic of today's webinar. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you very, very much. Let me just share my screen. And you can now see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so basically, Coral ITN, and I'm here to speak on its behalf, is a project that's funded by the Marie Curie action of the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. And as a Marie Curie action and an ITN, it consists of basically 15 15 PhD theses. So it's not a conventional research project, if any such thing exists, but it's a network of 15 PhD students and supervisors, and we're all basically working on broadly the same mission, which is to unpack the latent dynamics and impacts of collaborative workspaces in rural and peripheral areas. And then through those 15 theses and related activities, integrate our findings as development tools in local and regional policies to open up new potentials for socioeconomic development. So this is the really broad mission of the project. And our starting point was basically the observation that collaborative working spaces have been emerging and increasing since the early 2000s. And they've been emerging and increasing for many reasons. Well, the main one probably being the sort of increasing fragmentation of the world of work. And they provide the collaborative community-based approach to the organization of new modes of independent work, such as freelance and self-employment. And they started off and still mainly operate in the fields of cultural and creative industries. So this is basically the point where the broad interests of in situ and the broad interests of our projects collide. So they've initially started developing mainly metropolitan areas and urban agglomerations. However, as you know, we've observed recently the gradual spread of co-working spaces in less densely populated cities and towns, in rural and even peripheral regions across the EU that face particular challenges such as brain drain, low investment levels, little entrepreneurship, etc. So these rural co-working spaces seem to differ in terms of scopes, functions, and impacts compared to the predecessors in urban agglomerations. And the aim of the project is to basically investigate exactly that, whether they differ, as appears to be the case, and how they differ, and what impacts these spaces have on the lives of the individuals that use them, who are primarily creative workers and small entrepreneurs, on the areas and on the regions. So this is basically broadly the rationale of the project. And the identified research gaps and the way we think we might contribute to them through our project is therefore to first fully understand and analyze the scope and functions of co-working spaces in rural and peripheral areas and their impacts on the local socioeconomic environment, such as entrepreneurial ecosystems, creative scenes, etc. Second, to grasp the effects and impacts of co-working spaces on people, the users, the individual workers, and the enterprises, especially with regards to precarious employment, and see whether they may actually offer solutions to the precariousness that characterizes the creative workforce, and whether there's any difference in the way they do it between urban and rural places. And additionally, with regards to business, see whether local rural co-working spaces contribute or enhance business networks or social networks that also have knowledge effects in rural and peripheral areas. These are all things we've observed with urban co-working spaces. So basically the main challenge here is to see whether the model works, as is the hope of those spaces' founders and users, in non-urban places. And the third one is to basically identify if those positive effects are actually true, if they exist, to identify potential support mechanisms for developing co-working spaces that do serve different socioeconomic needs of diverse local communities, opening up the possibilities for further collaborations in the fields of entrepreneurship and social innovation, with an emphasis in small peripheral and rural cities, and how we might support those spaces in order to become community hubs and therefore maximize any positive impact they have on users and places. Now, the wider context within that basically contextualizes within which the debate happens is a debate in social geography, which has to do with the specific characteristics of rural and peripheral cities and towns, which have also been known in the literature as left behind places, with the intense socioeconomic inequalities between regions. The second aspect of this wider context is that we have indeed observed a continuous flow of creatives towards smaller cities, suburban areas, smaller rural towns, which has intensified by the pandemic as far as we can tell. So the question here is whether we are witnessing the formation of a rural creative class and how this class might differ from the urban creative class. And if it does differ, what are its distinct needs and how might co-working spaces actually serve those needs? We've obviously also witnessed an increase in remote working, again, intensified through the pandemic, but not actually caused by the pandemic. And we've witnessed and are still witnessing an increase in digital nomadism. So the wider context basically has a series of developments that will have an immediate effect on the needs of people who use co-working spaces and on the potential impacts or contributions rural co-working spaces may make. And now, regarding the issue of work in the collaborative working spaces, our intention, the project's intention, which materializes in a different way through the different 15 theses, is to see further what are the different concepts of work, or what are the different formations that work might take in rural and peripheral areas, and whether there are different business models, entrepreneurial networks, different dynamics of social innovation, different gender dynamics, whether labor precariousness, which is rife in the creative industries, as you all know, takes different forms in rural and peripheral areas, and what mechanisms might enhance sustainable rural development in the field that we are studying. And just to give you an idea of some findings that are actually relevant to the discussion that we are having today, one of the PhD theses that's actually being carried out by Michele Laga at the University of Vienna and Impact Hub Global is investigating how co-working spaces might operate as tools to foster entrepreneurialism and retain workers in rural areas. Michael's doing his work at the University of Vienna, has had the past working at Impact Hub, so he has a really strong interest in rural and peripheral social innovation. And I'm also reminding you that this is a project that started 2 years ago, so these theses are actually still in progress, and that's why I'm not talking about final findings or results. So basically, this thesis is looking at the way that the co-working spaces might support rural entrepreneurship and concentrates on 2 case studies in Spain and Austria. Most of the theses that make up the project actually have, all of them, have a comparative element, and they include fieldwork in more than one towns or places and in more than one countries within the EU, exactly in order to see how the local dynamics make a difference. And the hypothesis is that basically we can think of the benefits provided by co-working spaces in terms of tangible benefits and intangible benefits. Now, tangible benefits, especially for a very dispersed and fragmented workforce, and the very small or one-person enterprises that basically make up most of the creative sector appear to be very basic, but they are still necessary. So we are talking about the provision of cheap working space, the flexibility of the terms offered by co-working spaces as opposed to normal rentals, leases, etc. Flexible premises, and the possibility of shared resources, actual, tangible, everyday work resources. In terms of intangible benefits or ways of support, which are extremely important and actually contribute or could contribute to the increase of both social capital and financial capital. Co-working spaces offer knowledge exchange, and they do all those things in an informal manner between peers, which actually makes a huge difference. Learning opportunities, collaborations with other members who are in the same position, access to wider networks, which is a terrible problem for people working in the creative industries because they are faced with this situation where they have to basically be members of networks in order to be able to find jobs, projects, resources. These networks are always informal, but being really tiny enterprises in terms of the business studies or one-person enterprises, effectively freelancers, they can very easily find themselves isolated from those resources, especially if they've relocated very recently from urban agglomerations, which is where most of the creative sector is still located, to non-urban areas. And these intangibles, the ones that we've discussed up to now, may contribute to increased work satisfaction. And characteristically, actually, a survey we did as part of another project that was called Urban Co-work, and asked co-working spaces users about these benefits, saw that most users actually rated really highly work satisfaction and increased well-being, because they compared working co-working spaces to working alone at home, basically, or working alone in a really tiny studio under really precarious and sort of, financially pressed conditions. And that's a wider discussion, whether basically one of the possible intangible benefits would be the contribution of rural co-working spaces to this concept of urbanity, of the needs of recently relocated or return migrants, as they're called, from the creative sector, from big cities to smaller places, to retain some elements of sociality and lifestyle, which they had found really precious and appreciated in their lives in the big cities. Now, a second way to think about the rural or non-urban co-working spaces' contribution to entrepreneurial ecosystems or entrepreneurialism in general is to basically look at them as microclusters, as Ignacio Capdevila, who's also one of the supervisors who participate in the Coral project, has suggested in a couple of articles in 2013 and 2015. Now, why would we think of them as microclusters? Because they have the capacity, and they often do, because of their concentration of people who work on similar things, and because of their informality, to generate so-called knowledge communities, something that Ralph also, I think, discussed in his presentation, the possibility to share knowledge. Because they operate at a micro level scale as opposed to classic industrial or sectoral clusters that are basically really much more larger scale. Because Now, if we see them as microclusters, if we agree with Ignacio Capdevilla's arguments, which are actually supported by evidence, then we'd see that co-working spaces have a limited geographical impact. They're more likely to make an impact at the level of the neighborhood and the town or the village than the entire region by themselves. But they have a much greater social embeddedness and economic embeddedness, which means that their effects or their impacts at the local place may actually be quite noticeable and strong. They form and they encourage collaborations that are basically based on trust. Again, something that was emphasized by the two previous presentations, I'm very, very happy to say. And they have a capacity to generate local buzz, which in itself creates further opportunities. And through that, once it reaches, if it does reach a particular sort of critical point, reach global pipelines of other global, sort of national and wider transnational pipelines of other networks, of other creatives. And basically the concentration of people who work in the same wider field, but doing different things within a small space, and the informal relations and networks that develop through that, have the capacity to encourage different degrees of specialization. And this, again, given that these different degrees of specialization operate within the same small localized network, allows very good complementarity, makes things happen more easily, which when talking about non-urban spaces, and I think that's also something that was emphasized by the two previous presentations, these resources, knowledge resources, and sometimes tangible resources, or lack of infrastructure, make this intense degree of specialization and collaboration really useful. Now, at the level of the locality, if that's the case and co-working spaces operate as microclusters, and we do have evidence for that, then that means that they can make a better contribution to the local economy, not just to the participants, but also to the local economy. And basically start, once they become established, to function as a source of talents for larger firms within the same sector. Through the possibilities they provide, because co-working spaces operate on a program of networking with other co-working spaces, other actors, more kind of larger scale actors in the field, they may also provide space for interaction between insiders and outsiders. So say the insiders are the people who are kind of, bigger names in the field, and outsiders are the people who are incumbents, want to enter the field. Through this, they may contribute to increased resilience of territories, although this is a much larger scale issue that needs to be investigated basically at the level of the region at least. Or if they do so, they would do primarily through the absorption of external knowledge and the moving of knowledge resources from outside of the region to actors who are prevalent within the region. Now, through this, they may actually contribute to regional innovation or regional innovation systems. But as we know, there's no one-size-fits-all model for innovation. So basically, a precondition for innovation in peripheral areas has to do with the particular characteristics and specialization of those peripheral areas already, and the capacity that those peripheral areas have to develop this innovation. And in this way, co-working spaces and generally smaller hubs may be more suited to contributing to peripheral innovation systems rather than larger actors or larger clusters who tend to operate in a much more formalized manner, because they are actually much more flexible compared to larger actors. Now, what Miguel's thesis is doing is to actually investigate the degree to which those things do take place in selected co-working spaces in Spain, rural co-working spaces in Spain and Austria. By investigating those parameters, the degree to which they attract new entrepreneurs within the cultural and creative sectors, freelancers and workers, and then investigating what are the particular economic and knowledge dynamics which develop between newly relocated firms, entrepreneurs and workers and the existing local community. And when talking about economic and knowledge dynamics, these are then specified into job creation, the potential increase of social capital, the transmission of knowledge and innovation between actors, people, and small firms, whether they generate new employment opportunities, whether they generate possibilities for new skills to transfer between people and firms, whether they facilitate new partnerships, what's the relation to global pipelines and networks, whether it's actually easier to have access to those spaces when working from inside the co-working space rather than outside, isolated on your own, and whether they contribute to an increase or even a transformation of standard entrepreneurial culture. These are more or less the issues that I chose to focus on for today's seminar. But again, I'm reminding you that this is in many ways a massive project of 15 phases. So if you want to check out more details about the work of the thesis that the PhD students I talked about, or the work of the project, please link with our website. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Marta. Thank you. And next we have Ella Björn from Lapland University, and she's going to be representing the Smart Culture project. I believe that has already finished, Ella. Isn't that true? You have already finished your project.
Now I could unmute my microphone. Yes, this project finished by this June. Yeah, and can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So yes, I'm going to tell you more about the findings from the Smart Culture project, which was actually, yes, finished this June, and it was a 4-year project, and we were developing a sustainable cultural tourism in different regions in Europe. And my name is Ella Björn. I come from the University of Lapland. I forgot to say that in the beginning. But yes, I'm basing my presentation from the my own findings in general, but also the findings based on the Smart Culture project. And the Smart Culture project was a Horizon 2020 funded project. And we had several partners across the Europe. And in this project, as I mentioned, we developed sustainable cultural tourism in these different locations in Europe, and we utilized this living lab approach. So we had 6 different living labs, and 3 of those were based in urban contexts in bigger cities as Split in Croatia and Vicenza in Italy and Rotterdam in Netherlands. And then we had the 3 rural living labs, which were based in the smaller areas and villages. And we had Utsjoki in Finland and Skelderland area in Belgium. And then we had Huesca village in Spain. So we were developing different kind of art-based methods and service design tools to ideate sustainable tourism interventions to these areas, and that also benefit local creative industries and local livelihoods and preserve cultural heritage. And our living lab was based in Utsjoki, which is the northernmost municipality of Finland. It's located in top of Finland, and it has only 1,200 inhabitants, and it consists of 3 smaller villages, and the population is the majority is indigenous Sami. And we had in our living lab, we had different stakeholders representing the local tourism entrepreneurs. We had representatives from the creative industries and municipality representatives, reindeer herders, and together we were trying to find different solutions, basically for sustainable tourism, but also involving these creative industry representatives and finding ways to collaborate with tourism and creative sector as well. And as in these areas, for example, in Sami culture, nature and culture are very entangled concepts. So the nature is seen a part of the culture. So also our interventions were mainly based on nature, but also having this cultural approach also in them. And we were guiding tourists. We were finding solutions to how to guide tourists to act respectfully in nature, and also these interventions supported creativity and opportunities for creative businesses, also to showcase the values of the place, and through the artistic work to tell how to act and respect nature while the tourists are doing hikes or visiting the natural sites. And we were testing different kind of art-based and service design tools. And on the right side picture, you can see that we were broadcasting these different kind of art-based videos on different surfaces, and we were trying to inspire the local creative entrepreneurs or tourism entrepreneurs how they could utilize these different kind of creative methods also in their tourism products and services. And could there be some new kind of storytelling methods, how they could tell tourists more about the culture and through the artistic ways. And in Utsjoki, the tourism is very seasonal. It has based on salmon fishing during the summertime. So also this kind of new culture-based and creative products can help to tackle this issue and make the tourism also more sustainable and year-round. And one way that the creative industries and tourism is already collaborating a lot in Finnish Lapland is that there are handicraft workshops organized for tourists where the tourists can try these traditional manners of doing Sami handicrafts. And they are organized by the local Sami people, and they are at the same time they're teaching about the Sami culture, while the tourists can learn how to produce their own products as jewelries or other kinds of handicrafts. And there is this kind of label also developed which shows that which product is authentic Sami, made by local Sami people, since there are a lot of also fake products in the market. So this is a way that the local artists and handicraft makers can really preserve their cultural heritage, and they can it makes their company more viable by differentiating their product from the fake products in the market. So this is one solution that also benefits the creative companies in the area. And it also tells to the tourists which products are for tourists to buy, because not all of the Sami handicrafts are made for tourists. They are very personal or are made for personal use. For example, Sami dresses having different colors and symbols representing different personal things, but there are a lot of products that tourists can also buy as a souvenir, and these labels are made to help tourists also to recognize this. And there is a way for tourists to learn more about the culture through these handicraft workshops. And how to enhance the viability and collaboration more between creative industries and the tourism industry. There has been many projects where they are trying to encourage these small handicraft makers and designers to not only to sell their products, but also maybe organize the workshops for tourists, since they might be shy to organize these kind of things, and they're used to just sell their own products, or they might do the products in their homes. So these projects are trying to help them to realize a new kind of solutions, also to scale up their businesses, maybe for tourism industry as well, and try out if they could, for example, organize different kind of workshops and doing the handicrafts together with the tourists. And when it comes to the rural areas as Utsjoki, there are many challenges, of course, since it's located quite far away, even from Rovaniemi, which is the capital city of Finnish Lapland. So the distances are very long, and the area is very sparsely populated, and there is lack of services. So there is this kind of bigger ecosystem structure still kind of lacking. So there are many possibilities to support this kind of ecosystem building for creative companies, and to support their entrepreneurship even more, and try to encourage especially young people to be part of more in this creative work, to maintain the traditional knowledges, for example, doing the handicrafts or fishing or reindeer herding, and it can be combined with creativity as well. And there are many young people already doing, for example, Sami music, which keeps the cultural heritage alive in that way, and it encourages the young people to do their creative work as well. And utilizing these networks is very important in the rural areas, and collaborating with different industries, it becomes very crucial, since there are not so many service providers in these small villages, so you have to get along with everyone. And sometimes it's also a benefit that you can more easily keep the local identity, even though there are the global forces are not so much affecting, so you can even more easily to keep the local benefits and the identity as it is. And of course it requires a lot of skills from the small scale companies to operate in these rural areas. As Utsjoki, it requires digital skills, for example, nowadays even more, to be able to sell their products online. And also different kind of festivals and events are very important for these small businesses, where they can network and make their products more visible on the market, and also collaborate with different service providers. And when we are designing these new tourism services and products, it's very important to incorporate the local knowledges of creative companies also when developing these new services. And in the Smart Culture project, we tested out this creative placemaking approaches, where we did the performative and art-based methods in nature, where we our aim was to engage these different stakeholders for ideating new products, where tourism and art-based methods could be both utilized, and listening to their values and what things are important for them in a place, and how we could combine this also tourism with these creative methods. And yes, and there are many possibilities also for building this larger ecosystem for the creative companies, support their entrepreneurship. Also, we are doing it already in Rovaniemi in our university, but it could be supported even more in the whole Finnish Lapland scale, and also utilizing this growing interest of in Arctic nature and storytelling, and how we could utilize these digital solutions, for example, combined with creative industries even more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you so much. I would like to remind you all again about the poll that we have in our chat, and encourage you to take part in that and share your questions for our presenters in the chat window as well. Next up is Martin from Extremadura University, and he will inform us on the Cult Rural Plus project and any viability insights the project has delivered. Martin, welcome.
Hello, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much to the organization for the invitation. Thank you very much for all the public that is attending, especially also those that comes from the Learning Village International Network. That is something that I'm going to speak more even maybe than Cultural Plus, that it's a father project. But let me just share my screen and explain a bit. So, sorry, was the end. Okay, so I explained Elena Correia that we have coordinated from the University of Extremadura. I am now also in Castelo Branco, in the Instituto Politécnico de Castelo Branco. Is that why I have this double affiliation? I'm in a stage of professional requalification, becoming an anthropologist, but becoming a music educator also. So the projects that I'm going to speak about is projects Erasmus Plus, KA2, Strategic Partnerships, and the acronyms are Cultural Plus, Learnville, that is acronym for Learning Villages, and now also an ongoing project in the CERV Network of Towns program called also LVIN-C, Learning Villages International Network, working on citizenship, European citizenship. But anyway, today I'm going to talk more about culture and cultural heritage as the last presentation, and sharing very, very much the insights that our colleagues has already introduced. So maybe you will listen things for again the same things. Okay, so Cultural Plus was a project focused in cultural entrepreneurs, but we mean by entrepreneurs private and public entrepreneurs. So we have always care about also what we call mediators. So we have worked with SME, small enterprises and associations doing economic activity, and with municipal governments and mayors, very entrepreneur mayors. Sorry. After Cultural Plus, or during Cultural Plus, we had the opportunity to submit another project in the Erasmus Plus K2 actions, and it was centering, focusing more in the community, in the place, pretending, aiming to concentrate human capital and resources in some network of villages that we have called learning villages, because are places where we learn and share knowledge, and also do workshops and educational programs and actions. And from this project, so I share completely the vision of long-term that our first colleague, Ralph, stated. So these are projects that are consecutive, so they are also guaranteeing the sustainability of the projects. So this is the website of our actual project. Both are over Cultural Plus and Nerville, and this is now ongoing. This is our partners, network of partners. We have in Portugal, Sabrosa and Villamarín as learning villages. In Galicia, San Juan de Río. In Extremadura, we have Torre Orgaz, Torre Quemada, Casar de Cáceres, Sierra de Fuentes, we have 4. In Germany, we work with Dattingen in Swedish region, Cori in Italy, and also there is in the Napoli region, some villages that we are starting to work with. In Romania, we have here Florin from ADEMET, who is our partner association and is working with mountain villages. This is not updated, but Moldavia, we don't have a partner now. And in Greece, we work with Farcadona, with very peripheral villages, Messini, Mangania, Kos. I know we have Greek colleagues here that probably knows this place. Okay. What we have done, or what have we done? We have done research studies, diagnosis, good practices, benchmarking, we can call it, or researching cases of good practices to get inspiration, to get knowledge of their models, of their cases. And also we are working in material heritage databases for providing resources for guides, tourist guides, or museologists, any cultural interpreter or cultural heritage interpreter. We have done educational actions converging in coaching and training programs, so related to cultural heritage and natural heritage also. Environmental education is also one of our lines, concerning lines. Of course, international networking, it's something that it's really important. We agree with, I think all agree that it's something very, very important in rural areas as well as in urban areas. And we promote what we call relevant connections. What are relevant connections? It's not just one meeting like we are doing now and we don't get along again, but these meetings and these connections that allow or are a source for new meetings, for new projects, for new academic relationships, like, for example, a PhD. So that's what we try to promote, relevant connections. Reinforcing internationalization skills, it's something natural when you take people that don't have much experience and much proficiency in English, for example, to international conference abroad in other countries. So this is something very stimulating to see that people that has come to our international weeks after they take a course in English, or they really want to follow improving their international skills. We have done cultural promotion as well. We have promoted the internationalization of a local festival here in Cáceres called Plena Moon. It's a sustainable festival devoted to the moon and organized in the full moon nights in some months of the year. And the aims of the promoters is to bring it everywhere, all around the world. So we take it to Cori, to Italy, and take it to Portugal, to Villamarín. It's some little village. I'm talking about village of 200 inhabitants, ranging to 5,000. That is, Cori may have 5,000. Sabrosa 2,000, here where I am 2,000, so it's little villages in less favored regions. So this festival, Plena Moon, I think it gained much added value of this internationalization promotions. Historical reenactments also we are promoting reinforcing the organization, because they have already celebrated some editions in Sabrosa of Solstice festival based on the figure of the Druid mainly, and the Druidic cosmovision. So it's you will see some pictures also now. Bell ringing is very important for us in cultural heritage. Now it has been declared by the UNESCO worldwide World Cultural Heritage, the bell ringing and the bells and bell ringing. So we are promoting bell ringing, hand bell ringing in the villages, seeing also very interesting impact in the attracting people, in the visitors that are for the first time maybe, or that, and the local community also that have not heard the bell rang by hand for a long time, and it's very moving and shocking, and it's a very interesting way of promoting community cohesion and rural cultural tourism. So eco museums, we are also dealing with linen, with people, mostly women, that still know how to work with this linen to do very nice pieces of dresses. And this is in Villamarín, in one of the little villages there in Portugal. So we are just saying, you have all this value, we should do something, and to get some funding for them to promote this activity that is very rich and important. Environmental sensibilization also through our agreements, our partnership agreements. We try to be the most ecological, sustainable possible. So no more plastic in our actions. We try not to have plastic, and to have some criteria, environmental criteria, in the moment of organizing any international conference or international week. Digital humanities, it's been something brought from our partners from Portugal, the Association of History and Archaeology of Sabrosa. has, and we have seen really how low cost and low time and easy is now to scan any monument. We have done it with a little church, an hermitage in a rural area, and it's been in 24 hours, well, 15 minutes a drone flight, and after 24 hours we had the snow points of the, so we have all the measures can be with a little, very little margin can be sized, and well, it's something that we know it's very important for cultural heritage now. These facilities and friendly software and open software to virtual reconstruct. Also with archives, we are very fond on archives and to digitize archives and with recognizable text for improving the research facilities, and to take all added value that we can take to better explain the community, the history of the community to local inhabitants, and also to take advantage for tourism purpose also. Social cartography, we find it very interesting also, and we are doing some cases, some examples of community maps, meaning that interviewing people and doing some discussion groups to know what is the important places for the community that may come in the tourist maps, but may not appear, and they are very interesting also to know how is the social change between generations, also how the former generation use the space in a very different way that the present generation had another very different relationship with places and the elements. So we also care about social cartography, like tree maps, for example, something very easy also to do with easy. It's affordable and feasible in rural areas more than in big cities. But we have New York City well mapped with all the forest, well, all the trees, sorry, individually mapped, and saying how they save money to the city by capturing CO2, and okay, it's very interesting, the tree maps and the community maps. Oh, of course, we try also to continue our activity by looking for new funding, new projects. So we are also very aware about new technologies and digital social networks to promote participatory democracy and community participation in the public life. So it's very important also for us to promote this in our learning villages. Here we are in a meeting in Cori, speaking and doing some workshops on citizenship, participatory democracy, participatory budget. Also here you can see Gerardo, I think is present among us, and is showing how this digitizing can be used also for regions, for areas, for water courses, very useful. We care about the culture of culture and agriculture, the local products. Here is in Korea, also wine is very important, also oil. So we are trying in this database of material heritage to join songs, legends, stories, whatever about oil and wine in our countries to offer some resources for interpretation of this heritage in museums or in wineries like this. This is the mayor of Cori, in a neighborhood that was frequently not very taken into account in the infrastructure works, and a little bit abandoned. So we are promoting also in the less favored areas inside the less favored areas. So we have done here a nice meeting between the local community and our partners. Here we are in Greece, in Messini. We are seeing the Museum of Olive Oil. So that's why we are working on resources for interpretation. This is in Portugal. This is the solstice historical reenactment. We are all dressed a little bit like the Druids, and there is traditional music there. Here you can see more the Druids in the middle of archaeological site of a necropolis of Tousas in Sabrosa. And we are doing this recreation of reenactment of the solstice, the Druidic solstice. This is in Casar de Cáceres. It's a cut image, but there is 50 people there with the local inhabitants. We are speaking with an anthropologist about the places. It's called in Spanish Las Corralas, the places where ports were closed and cared during a part of the year. We have done books about also active aging in rural areas, about the future of rural Europe, a lot of conferences, many things during these years. You have all the links to the websites, project websites. If you are interested, there is the summary. This is a very nice special case that is inspiring us, and I want to stop a little bit more deeply in this, because it's well, I think it's one of the best practices cases that we can show to the new European Bauhaus also, that we want to compete for an award also, and maybe Europa Nostra also. Here you can see this the sword. I don't know if you are seeing my cursor. This is the sword of Muruas. It's a reconstruction, virtual reconstruction. This is a sword that was buried. It's a Celtic style from Germany, hemicoffen sword from 1,000 years before our era, before Christ. And it was hidden in one big rock like this one, but bigger. And it was in this place in Galicia. And when the workers were doing the new roads in Spain, that is the development also a little bit wild development that we had in the 60s, in the 70s, they dynamite the stones. They were sacred stones with many signs that were carved, and they dynamite, and the sword came out from the stone when it was exploded, and it was taken firstly for the workers, but after the authorities, the archaeologists, took it to the museum in Orense. And it's 40 minutes or 50 minutes away from the village, but also in the museum is not shown this sword. So we would we thought on bringing it back to the local community. So our Portuguese colleagues went to Spain, to the Museum of Orense. So this is international cooperation also, and take 200 pictures of the original sword, and reconstructed virtually, and had to print it in a 3D printer. So we took it back to the village, and this has also make us thought in these Celtic roots, share Celtic heritage and roots. So we are asking for funding for developing interpretation centers and activities like festivals, also historical reenactment on the Celtic share heritage or culture.
Martin, thank you so much. I have to interrupt because we're really running out of our time frame we have already put in place, and I would like to thank you for your introduction. And so we can move into the discussion part. I'd like to invite Lydia Varbanova from the National Academy of Theatre and Film Arts and an in-situ partner to start her presentation, and then we can move into the general discussion part.
Thank you, Erna. Thanks very much. I'm not going to do presentation. We're running out of time, and I would like to just sum up, giving some highlights of what I heard in this very, very interesting webinar. So I'll say 5 things in literally 8 minutes, and then we're going to open up for discussion. So as far as I hear, why is it so important and great to work locally? I myself come from a family of entrepreneurs, and my grandma and grandfather, they've never been on salary. They used to live in very small villages. So I really know from my childhood why it's so great to work in such kind of rural areas. This is because of lower cost of doing business, because also we have so rich cultural traditions in very remote areas across Europe and the world, because we have sense of community, because we have this neighborhood feeling, which is so beautiful and so great. If you start something and if there is a sparkle, then the neighbors come and then they continue with you, which is really amazing. Because we have much healthier work-life balance. Entrepreneurs in smaller areas are not as stressed as the one they are in a much bigger cities. And also because we have much bigger access to very specialized resources, very specialized expertise, a lot of small-scale industries or crafts that are really important. So my second point is why small and rural is so important for the economic viewpoint and social viewpoint. First of all, because it's also have a great potential to attract investments. This is why all of us promote entrepreneurship in these non-urban areas. This is why in-situ projects is so important, because we would like to really attract attention and attract potential more and more investments in these remote areas across Europe. Also because there is viability which goes beyond the individual businesses, because we impact the community, these small villages where people don't have very many choices for arts and culture. Also because our projects in these non-urban areas, they try to reduce the unemployment rates to create job opportunities for all these local residents. Because we try to preserve cultural traditions, cultural heritage, which might be lost otherwise due to globalization and urbanization. So what we do is really opposite to the globalization, and this is why it's also so important. And finally, because we promote the local production, the local consumption. So all this value chain between the production and consumption on a rural and non-urban areas is important, and it's often very much denied by not denied, but very much not within the local policies. So this is why we researchers and entrepreneurs, educators, have to lobby the local authorities so that they should be much more passionate about supporting this local creative entrepreneurship. My third point is about how do we collaborate. As far as I heard from all these amazing and very diverse examples, there are a couple of repeating patterns how we collaborate as small-scale entrepreneurs in these rural areas. Networking, very important, building relations with businesses, educational institutions, government bodies, community organizations. Second thing is seeking funding from diverse resources, because this diversifying portfolio is terribly important for small-scale entrepreneurs, as well as attending diverse industry events that are conferences, workshops, that are even beyond arts and culture. Embracing the new technology, exploring all these digital platforms. And there is a lot to do and a lot to work with education, training of these small-scale entrepreneurial companies so that they understand much more the artificial intelligence potential, the digital platforms, social media, and so on. Collaborating with educational institutions, very important, because we have to have these seeds to have a lot of curricular development in the universities, training centers, as well as schools about creative entrepreneurship, including also in rural areas. And also patterning with the tourism industry. We heard that all these projects presented greatly from our colleagues are really connecting the creative entrepreneurship, the cultural experiences that attracts visitors, and they boost the local economy. So examples of how we do that in small scale are a lot. We heard about artisanal cooperatives, we heard about co-working spaces, creative clusters, terribly important. With UNESCO, we did also very interesting research about these creative hubs, creative placemaking, creative clusters in non-urban areas. Sustainable farming initiatives, cultural festivals, social enterprises, community art centers. I have also prepared plenty of examples, but I'm going to skip them. And they come from Peru, from USA, from Ghana, from Chile, from Thailand, from many countries outside of Europe, including also Central Asia, where I work a lot. But those of you, I'll send my email. Those of you who are interested, I'm also going to send it. And finally, the tips, how can we really be more proactive in the small scale enterprises? Very important to have the niche market and to identify this niche market, and at the same time to really look outside of our localities, to have these global online platforms and use them very well. Second is the innovation and adaptability. You heard that all these projects we heard, they're very innovative, but they also have to add these risk mitigation strategies. What might happen if my first plan is really going to collapse? The third one is collaboration, strong community connection. And the final two, diversifying the revenue streams. We have to really try to work with local entrepreneurs to look for even hidden resources, even hidden streams of revenues. And the final one, the power of volunteers. The small-scale enterprises cannot survive without really having this wonderful spirit and wonderful energy of volunteers in all these small places. So this is why, as conclusion, supporting creative small-scale organizations in all the areas, research, education, specific consultancy, mentoring, monitoring, and so on in all these rural areas is very, very active and very vital. I strongly believe in that. And this is why my own motivation and the motivation of my academy to be part of the SITU project is exactly because of that. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Lydia. That was a very clear and precise sum up of today's talks. And we are really running out of time, and I'm sorry for that. And we are going to have to make a little adjustment in our schedule. But we have now come to the general discussion part of today. And I would love it if my colleague Lorena could bring to forth the questions that we have in our chat. Lorena?
Thank you very much, Erna. Welcome everybody to the discussion. Well, we have a very few time. We had very nice presentations, and we don't want to close our webinar without giving the voice to all the people attending today. So I will invite you to make like 2 questions, very clear, very objective, and please, if you can present yourself, just your name and institution, and say to whom are you posing the question, it will be great. Thank you very much to everybody, and please welcome your questions. If you want, you can raise your hand and you can appear if you want to appear in the camera, or then send by the chat. Meanwhile,
I actually, Lorena, have a question about the non-urban new creative class. I found that very interesting that Martha mentioned. What are why are we seeing this happening?
Thank you. And thanks everyone for their excellent presentation. I think a combination of parameters, extremely rising rents in big cities. Basically, the financialization of housing in big cities is a really important parameter. Rising age, increasing age, the changing demographics of the creative sector that's now been a very established business sector and very broad business sector for more than 20 years, almost 25 years, which means that people who entered the sector in its rise at the very beginning around 2000 are now aging and mostly have may have families, not mostly have families, but may have families. So need for more space, more personal space as well, and cheaper personal space. More manageable lifestyle, smaller distances, basically like really tangible parameters. Plus the effect of COVID, which certainly had an effect on people's desire to go and live somewhere that's less densely populated. And the increasing availability and normality of remote working. All these parameters basically conspire to make a move outside cities more likely than before. Now, given this, we see what we call return migration of urban creatives into more peripheral areas, and that's actually now being relatively well documented. It's not just an impression. So the great question is, what are the necessary facilities and social capacities that will make these people stay in those areas? And another question is whether the composition of this rural creative class is different to the urban creative class, but that's too early to tell at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Marta. Thank you very much. Can I place another question, Erna?
Of course.
Is there anyone wanting to make some questions?
Yes. Hello, Lorena. Can I add to that?
Yes.
Hi.
Welcome, Karin.
Yes. Hello. I'm from the Netherlands, but I've been living in Portugal already for 16, 17 years right now. And I would like to add to the previous observation that I think it's truly seen now. There's a lot of people from Northern European countries, especially very urbanized areas, to go to more rural areas. And they bring with them this need for a more cultural environment, a need to connect with others, a need to integrate, but also to bring their, say, urban necessities of having a nice cafe, having some cultural events, etc., etc. So what I do see is that this influx of people who do want to integrate, but still bring their urban lifestyles with them would probably contribute to the fact that new initiatives will rise up. There are new entrepreneurial activities for this. I'm an example of that. For 14 years, and Lorena and Nancy all know that quite well. I've been in really a very rural area in Portugal, in the Serra da Estrela, having there a festival running. Now I'm based in the Algarve, and I'm going to set up a creative hub here. And we already feel that there's a lot of local people who are very interested because it doesn't exist. Yes, there are some sort of the traditional festivals, but this more avant-garde, more creative, more connection, that is a real chance actually for rural areas to develop this kind of creative industries here. So it's not a question, but I just want to contribute to it.
Okay, thank you very much, Karin. Any other question or share thought? If not, I will
Lorena, I think Musa would like to answer and give his perspective too about
this
question. I see it in the chat now.
Okay, I have also another question for Musa.
So then maybe let's just combine. Maybe let's hear the question first, and then I'll kind of combine.
I was asked, Musa and Ralph, I was thinking on mixing you to build together a kind of practical answer about partnership, because you talk, Ralph, about it took 7 years to meet partners, and you talk about redefining partnerships. So my question is, which criteria to use? What do you recommend us? How to define a win-win relation from your experience and from a very practical point of view, if you accept the challenge, Musa and Ralph. Thank you very much.
Shall I go first, Musa, or would you like to go first?
You can go first.
It's a really good question. Really good question. $64 million question. Just in reply to Karen's comment, we do a lot of performances in villages, and there's a big change. Obviously, demographics in Europe is going to vary, but there's been a big demographic change in the UK. So you have a lot of people over the last 20 or 30 years moving into a rural place. And as Karen says, so you can bring friction. You have local people who've lived in a place for generations who are there's a tribalism potentially. And then when you have new people coming into an area with maybe different ideas or not, then it creates an interesting dynamic, but it can also create friction. And one of the things that we hope is that the performances that we support those villages to present is a neutral meeting ground. It's a social event, it's a meeting ground. And we encourage the promoters to be as open when they invite the audience in as we can ask. The other is I was reading recently that I always get my definitions wrong. Millennials, people born in the 80s and 90s, the attraction of work is falling. That there's a more of an interest in quality of life. And I think this is one of the things why people might question whether they stay in a city or whether they maybe relocate, where they feel that there may be factors that improve their quality of life. So this might also be relevant. So in terms of partnerships.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Musa?
Well, I was going to... So I was just going to address the question very briefly about partnership, and that is,
of course,
getting to know people. Getting to know people is liking people, getting to know people, good communicators. I think having a past history, a track record, having kind of proven experience, and I think you look for different characteristics in different partners. If you're working, we've recruited artists that have just come out of college with very little experience, but we felt that their art form skill and their personality was an incredibly important factor. And when we talk about stakeholders and partners, we have the stakeholders who are the contributors, the people working on the ground, the individuals that make the projects happen in reality, and then the other stakeholders are the funders. And usually with a project, we try to create a steering group. So a group that is representative of all the different stakeholders so that people can have regular involvement and regular review with those representatives in terms of how that project is going. And we have to be open to change. That if the idea that we started a project isn't working, we have to be flexible and to be willing to change. Open-mindedness, and then I go back to some of the other things I talked in my presentation. So over to you, Musa.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to the question around why the sudden movement back into rural or semi-urban spaces. From where I am in South Africa, given our social political context, not only is it out of wanting to go back to our spaces and contribute towards economic development, but it's also politically, it's also a political move, because we need to remember that creatives in South Africa, up until this point, really, we are largely defining what is art on the basis of our colonizers. And so the need for us to decolonize ourselves, our expression, and the way that we do it is part of the reason why a large sum of us are going back into our own spaces to literally do things the way that we want to do. So I can go on with that, but that is largely the summary of that. Now, moving on to the question around partnerships. This one is multi-layered, really. If, for instance, I were to talk as a board member of STAND, what we are and what we do is we are a foundation or an organization that seeks to partner or to form relationships with organizations and individuals that are like-minded or that contribute towards the sustenance of theatre and dance in South Africa. But we are also very clear about the ethical approach that the individual, the organization, etc., use if and when they work. Of course, the partnership might not always be on the basis of money, but sometimes it's about sharing a vision and encouraging each other in terms of, we see what you're doing, the approach and the target community that you work with, and we would like to stand with you. Now, as a practitioner myself, if and when I look for partners, I not only look for people that are going to financially contribute towards whatever it is that I do, because then automatically that transaction is somewhat political, because whoever has a larger pocket has a bigger say in the nature of the relationship that we are going to have. So I agree with Ralph when he speaks about having a neutral ground, but also having a two-way relationship where the relationship is going to mutually benefit you, but I, as an artist, still feel that I have the say as to how I want to participate in the partnership and what it is that I bring. Because a lot of the time in South Africa specifically, within our Black communities, it is common for corporate businesses, as an example, to come in and say, I would like to make you my corporate social investment project, which basically means I will fund whatever it is that you're doing. But realistically, you find that a lot of the time, it's just their mechanism of cleaning their tax transactions. So there's a lot that one can dissect under this one.
Okay, thank you very much, Musa. We will close with Nicola's question. Please, Nicola, the floor is yours.
Everybody's hearing me? Say hi, okay?
Yes.
Okay, maybe making a short remark on Lydia's intervention. And I think it was she that she referred the term as the diversified portfolio and the need of organization. I manage an NGO. We kind of work in the middle field of co-working and arts center and social gathering place. So we have for 14 years, I think that's a very interesting diversified portfolio. And I would like to ask her if she has really something to say on experience about what I might call lobbying towards diversified business models, the need of having in our organization to survive a connection with public policies. How can we articulate our will to do, our will to intervene and to provide an atmosphere so that diversified business models can thrive. I think it's thrive the expression, because I feel that we all need to be much more active and to have representation on public policies, and we don't seem to reach there. Public policies have been taken into field without having us in consideration. We need to be represented in the right forums, but it doesn't seem to be very easy. It isn't easy because politics do keep the decision making for them. But how do we validate? We're always here in Caldas da Rainha. In my project, it's called Silos, Creative Containers. We're always trying to get there, trying to avoid to be in politics, but it seems that there's no other way to do it. I think it's a permanent fight. We're trying to avoid. Everybody wants us because we take people with us, because we interact socially, because we set the standards for new paradigms of representation in the social scene.
Nicola,
is this
thank
common
you.
for everybody? Sorry for the long question. Is
Yeah,
this common for
Nicola, I think
everybody?
Lydia could maybe give it her
I'll be
answer.
very brief. You know what, Nicola and myself, we already just became friends on Facebook, so we are very fast, and we're going to continue the conversation. I have a very quick answer to you. From my experience, how can we lobby local authorities? At variety of levels. Number one, personal. Go, invite to a restaurant, use your friends of friends of friends. The problem is that politicians change very often, and this is how we cannot have this legacy of what we try to achieve. Second, through medias. Try to put cultural entrepreneurs and artists in all these discussions that are outside of arts and culture, which is about the environment, about healthcare, about the local transportation, about infrastructure, about the trees, about everything that is much more popular rather than arts and culture, and that increases the visibility. Number three, try through different types of networks, and also we all try to boost the local politicians and to really motivate them to be more keen for in-kind support. For example, providing us spaces, providing us places on a lower rent, because we are creative entrepreneurs. We are not just businesses. Helping them to understand that they have to also lobby our governments for changing of legislation, legislatory activities that can motivate others to invest in arts and culture. Plus the last point, that our politicians at local level have to be much more supportive, not only for the NGOs in arts and culture, but also for the businesses, for creative businesses. And I promise to you specifically and to everybody, we're going to continue our conversation through all the possible networks and social networks. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Lydia,
so much.
just one small word. Thank you very much for the validation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Thank you, guys.
Brilliant.
Thank you. I would love to hear a little bit about the poll results and how they reflect on our talks today. And then we're going to get the reflections from Susan Luckman, because guys, we were already over time and we need to wrap up really quickly. Claudia, do you have the poll results?
Yes, just shortly, 1 minute, so we can go to Susan afterwards. So we had like 30 answers in our poll. Mainly, most of the professional profile of people are mostly researcher, but we also have a lot of artists and other professional profiles like consultants, educators, cultural promoters, NGO project coordinators, chairs of NGOs and other types of artists related with programs, programming, and etc., facilitating creative entrepreneurship. Also, the field where people are operating, we're mainly in the arts field, but we also have a lot of people related with design, architecture, and crafts. Then we have also many people coming from, of course, Europe. We have a lot of people from Europe, from North America too, and from Oceania. And the countries, we have a lot of different countries here. We have Bulgaria, Croatia, Iceland, Italy, Portugal, of course, Spain, Sweden, Turkey. And also the three main challenges that people identified in the CCI ecosystem, the mostly voted ones were public support and funding. Then after that, strategy and public policy, and then capacity and infrastructure. Just a short summary about the last question we had for you. So what do you think were most contributes to the viability of creative small-scale enterprises? So people mention advertising and marketing. international marketing especially, and how that relates with having public events and outreach. I mean, this is very much related with this last question we were having. We have also the need to have capital and investment in the startups, and seed funding was something that was also mentioned, and specific community support for specific events and activities. A lot of people also mention the need for community participation, the need to articulate research, and how to retain knowledge and experience that already exists. And in relation to that, how to keep and extend the networking capacity and the collaboration and the existence of the need to co-productions and to exchange expertise and connecting to external links, and the connecting between external links and the local capabilities that already exist in the different locales. Other things like individual endurance and belief, which is also very interesting, the need to have education and relation with the education sector, and finally the capacity and infrastructure. So this is just, you know, a short summary. We could go deeper into this, but we are really running with short time. So
thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you for this. Susan, I would like to ask you if you can respond to both the talks that we've had, all the introductions, and then to the poll results that Claudia just introduced.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I'm joining you tonight from Garniata, which other people might know in English as Adelaide, South Australia. That's a lot of things to do in a very short amount of time, so I'll do my best to try and jump into it. Excuse me while I just share my screen. I've already contracted this to try and make it short, sharp, and shinier. One of the first things that really came through to me today in all the presentations, and it certainly resonates with my own work, which is there's a lot that unites all our various experiences. I'm coming from a very different, perhaps geographic context, but so much of what was said today resonated. And key among these is the fact that non-urban arts and creative practice is expected to do a lot of the heavy lifting in communities. Ralph, I think, spoke about the fact we got to make sure that arts isn't seen as some sort of magic solution to all sorts of problems in communities, but they are, in non-urban settings especially, expected to do a lot. One organisation that's doing quite an amazing job of this that I've worked with are the Jumpy Desert Weavers, who are on screen now. As a social enterprise, they operate across hundreds of thousands of kilometres of Central Australia, working with Aboriginal people in country. They operate on a social enterprise model, so they buy everything that is made from the local grasses, woven into all sorts of items. They operate at both an international arts level, where you can walk into a gallery in Europe and see some of their work. They also operate at a very hyper-local level of providing work to people who get trapped, for example, for medical or other reasons in Alice Springs, the main city of Central Australia, and need to get back to country and need to get money. So operating at sort of those big macro international art scene levels and the very local, hyper-local level of supporting people when they need cash in remote areas. And the other thing that their success and the wonderful products they do, which are Aboriginal arts centres, especially in their move to craft away, in addition to visual arts, have been a big success story on Etsy and international distribution channels that we did hear a little bit about earlier in terms of opportunities for regional creativity, especially as more people move online to purchase. But they also just reveal the fact that rural creativity and arts is not a deficit model. And that's the other thing I think really came through today. The opportunities are tremendous. And the specific fact that often non-urban creative practice is about specific unique experiences, unique products, unique practices and places. And I've tried to sort of theorize this through the lens of craft terroir or creative terroir, the fact that local environments give rise to very specific characters and products. So just moving very quickly, I don't know if I can go through all the things that were mentioned there in these poll. I certainly can't speak to, or it's going to be hard to sort of come up with a business model very quickly. I know the entrepreneurialism has been spoken about a lot today. And that is certainly, I know, where governments in Australia want us to increasingly go to. It's hard to find government money, and that's where often we find ourselves applying for other kinds of mechanisms, maybe it's health. But in terms of strengths, we've already heard about tourism, links to the artisanal. I think this is under threat, which I'll get to in a second, the fact that there can be more affordable options for people working in non-urban spaces. You can afford to have space where you can't necessarily in cities. Although I think it was Musa who mentioned that that's quite the opposite potentially where he's working. Quite a few people spoke about access to tourist markets, important for rural non-urban creative practice, but obviously there are challenges that were mentioned today, which I'll get to in a sec. And also the fact that one of the advantages that a lot of non-urban creative practice has is proximity to decision makers in communities. Unlike big cities where it's harder to get access to the mayor or a governor or some leader, often in local communities and non-urban areas, it can be easier. So we haven't heard too much about this today, but it's not always good news. It's late at night, my computer's decided to play its own game, excuse me. So training gaps and a lack of critical culture, this is where getting people back into communities, I think, is important. Maybe we let young people leave if they wish, but we encourage them to come back at key points in their life, such as when they're looking to have children, to have that space that people spoke about earlier, and also semi-retirement, trying to get people quickly back into the community if they've got creative skills, creative networks is important. The post-productivist countryside, we've heard a bit about the shift, the rise of a creative class in the rural area. I think we need to always be keeping an eye on housing affordability, as people have mentioned here today, that especially when you've got tourism markets expanding in non-urban areas, you've got platform options for accommodation like Airbnb, often pricing locals out and often creative people out. These are all challenges we need to keep an eye on and work with people who are working around how we get better solutions to some of those issues. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to quickly leave it there, except to say there are a lot of fantastic opportunities. Finding now, moving forward, we're living in a time when I think non-urban creative practice and arts are actually at an exciting place. Fingers crossed, post the pandemic, there's greater acknowledgement of the importance of arts for art's sake, or creative practice for community development. And we're certainly seeing a real valuing of non-urban spaces and practices. We're running our space, so I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. That was a very lovely closing note, you know, all these testimonials. Now, we're drawing near to the end of today's program, and it has been very informative and lovely to spend this Thursday morning with all of you. And I would like to take this time to thank you all for your participation and ask Nancy Duxbury, our in-situ lead researcher, to conclude our first webinar. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. I had some notes on the various threads that I saw in the different presentations, but since we've had such wonderful speakers doing that already, I will leave that for after. So again, let's see, what were my other notes? Thank you for the inspiring presentations and discussion and everyone's participation. The presenters, the discussants, the participations in general, our host, Erna, who's disappeared, our production team, Paula, Helena, Claudia, and Lorena, thank you very much for making this possible. I forgot to say at the beginning, In Situ is a Horizon Europe funded project. We have 13 partners and we work primarily in 6 lab regions in the Azores of Portugal, in the Galway area of Ireland, the West Coast area of Iceland, Roma and Jorikki, I'm probably pronouncing that terribly wrong, in Finland, in Valmiera, Latvia, and Šibenik in Croatia. So, and of course with partners in other countries as well. And we hope this larger array of collaborators as we go forward. We do hope that this turns into what was mentioned as, relevant connections, and that it isn't just a one-time thing. And that we can, and also as part of that, I should also note, we have our wonderful international advisory board, as well as an array of outreach partners, including Stand, where it was speaking from today. And so we hope to bring this type of discussion, this type of attention to the value and as well as the challenges of non-urban cultural practice, not only to a European discussion, but an international discussion, and to plant the seeds of initial side initiatives that may generate. I put in the chat a few times to go to our website. I won't show, I had it ready, but that's okay. What happens next? We're going to be finalizing the recording, putting it online on our website, insituculture.eu, under resources. We'll also contact you again when that's available. And we are having 2 more webinars in the next while. The next one is on October 30th. How can cultural and creative industry ecosystems be fostered in non-urban areas? So this will talk not only to cultural development, but also innovation, but really looking at that networking and that collaboration, which has come through, so important today, and to rethink partnerships and to re-envision what these connections can do, and to take the outsiders into insiders and all the other thing we've heard. And the second one will be on December 7th on how does cultural and creative work contribute to place-based sustainability and resiliency? So this takes it a bit further and looks more at the impact of all of this activity on the communities in which it is situated. And in the longer term, we hope to see you in the next few months, but in the longer term, we have our first conference for In Situ that is being organized in Šibenik, Croatia, in the second half of September 2024. So we hope to be able to keep you all in contact with what In Situ will be doing, and see you in person, perhaps in Šibenik. Thank you again.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.